Comenzamos el bloque informativo en Extra News.
Fue un gran viaje a un lugar fantástico en Pensilvania. Los trabajadores del acero están muy contentos de que hayamos establecido los aranceles. Los va a igualar y los hará aún más competitivos. Gran trato. Creo que será un negocio fantástico. Se están invirtiendo $17 millones en nuevas acerías. Será algo especial, así que fue un honor a los trabajadores del acero de Pensilvania. Fue un momento fantástico. Tuviste un gran día y está lloviendo bastante fuerte, pero está bien. Pensilvania, una vez más, la capital mundial del acero. Creo que va a pasar. Y otra vez, acabamos de tener $17 mil millones. ¿Lo entiendes? Vamos a tener el control en Estados Unidos. Será un acuerdo de Estados Unidos. El tablero está controlado. Lo más importante es que el dinero se construye, ya sabes, gastando en instalaciones. No puedes tomarlos y dejarlos así y ponerlos en un bote. Bueno, alguien dijo, bueno, ¿qué pasa con eso? ¿Y si se van? Él está invertido. Creo que lo más importante es que será una gran asociación. La caída de las empresas se acerca a los $17 mil millones más. Fantástico trabajo, buena inversión. Está controlado por Estados Unidos y lo que es más importante, están gastando el dinero en tiendas físicas. No puedes soportarlo. ¿Qué vas a hacer? Recógelo y llévalo a Japón la segunda mitad y ya lo he rechazado unas 4 veces. Y sí, finalmente lo hicimos bien. Me gustaría saberlo. Se podría ver lo felices que están los trabajadores del acero, que era más importante. Estaban muy felices. Como se puede ver desde el punto de vista sindical, al sindicato le encantó. Miles de ellos significan miles de puestos de trabajo en Pensilvania, ¿verdad? Muchos. Me gusta este hombre y yo no consumía sustancias con regularidad, drogas. Es un tipo fantástico y el apoyo a ese triplete con cualquier cosa que tenga que ver con Irán, pienso que es fantástico. Es un gran trabajo. Y cuando esté terminado tendremos números que son... hizo un trabajo fantástico y no lo necesitaba. No necesitaba hacerlo. Aprobar el acuerdo final. Cuando lo ves, quiero decir, pero tengo que aprobar el trato final con el archivo zip. Todavía no he visto el acuerdo final, pero hicieron un compromiso muy grande y es una inversión muy grande. Es la mayor inversión en la historia del estado de Pensilvania en cualquier negocio, no solo del acero, y no lo es. Miles de trabajadores del acero, y no solo allí, sino en todo el país. ¿Apoya usted el proyecto de ley de Lindsey Graham, Blumenthal, imponer sanciones a Rusia? No sé, tengo que verlo. Echaré un vistazo y confío en que su propuesta de alto al fuego en Gaza, presentada esta semana, será aprobada por Hamas. Creo que quieren salir de ese lío, son grandes. Creo que quieren salir de esto. ¿Habrá algún acuerdo comercial la próxima semana? Y este acuerdo de hoy con Japón ayuda de alguna manera a sus conversaciones con ese país. Quiere mucho hacer un acuerdo comercial. No creo que tenga mucho que ver, pero por supuesto, ciertamente no dolerá porque lo tenemos. La relación con Japón la tenemos, pero como Japón está ahí ahora mismo, estamos negociando mientras hablamos. Quieren un acuerdo muy pronto. Creo que el acuerdo del que estoy más orgulloso es el hecho de que estamos tratando con India, con Pakistán y pudimos detener potencialmente una pugna nuclear con Ucrania, a diferencia de las balas, ya sabes, normalmente lo hacemos a través del comercio en vez de balas. Así que estoy muy orgulloso de ello. Nadie habla de ello, pero la pasamos muy mal. Una posible pugna en curso entre Pakistán y la India y ahora, si miramos, las cosas se estaban poniendo muy malas. Me estaban poniendo muy mal. Los representantes vendrán la próxima semana y como ustedes saben, estamos muy cerca de llegar a un acuerdo con India. No tendría ningún interés en hacer un trato con ellos si no lo viera. El G7 que está aquí en las 2 semanas se trasladará a Canadá. Mark Carney, ahí arriba, obviamente tiene una visión del mundo diferente a la tuya. Claramente, ¿cuál será tu mensaje del G7 en un par de semanas? Será en Canadá. Es un tipo muy agradable, por cierto, Mark Carney. Creo que es realmente una persona muy agradable y nosotros hablamos por teléfono. Lo de Susie Wells ha sido instada y alguien se ha hecho pasar por ella. Si dijeras que ella es una mujer increíble, ella puede manejarlo, pero he escuchado que ha llegado a sus teléfonos o ellos. Nadie puede invitar a Susie, solo hay una Susie. ¿Qué mensaje le darías a los estudiantes universitarios chinos en Estados Unidos que desean quedarse en el país? ¿No quieren su visa? Sí, él fue quien dijo, no sé por qué Harvey no nos da la lista. Algo está pasando porque Harvard no nos da o no nos está diciendo, no nos está dando una lista. Supuestamente una familia de voces, queremos gente que pueda amar nuestro país, cuidarlo. Danos una lista, por favor, danos una lista. Les sugerí a todos que abandonen la carrera ahora. Adiós a todos.
You're back from Vegas. The crypto speech was a big hit. And I know a lot of smart people love crypto. I know some smart people actually have reservations about it.
Sure.
For our audience, can you just kind of make the case for crypto and people who have, concerns and quite frankly don't even understand it? There are a lot of folks out there. I know a lot of people own it, but
yeah, of course. So look, I'm an owner of Bitcoin here, but I'm also the Vice President of the United States. So I want to be careful, but I think the core value proposition of cryptocurrency is that it's a way of transacting and a way of storing value in a modern digital age. Look, 100 years ago, if you wanted to go and buy something, you put a dollar bill on the table, you put a gold coin on the table. The value proposition of Bitcoin is that it can serve the same function, but in a digital age, a way that's secure, that's safer from fraud, that allows people to buy and sell and store value, but in a way that's consistent with the modern technological age that we live in. Now, having said that, I fully accept there are risks to all of these things. There are always risks to new technologies. Our approach in the Trump administration is to say, let people innovate. Let people figure this stuff out on their own. If the critics of Bitcoin are right, I happen to think that they're wrong. That will eventually win out in the marketplace. If the advocates of Bitcoin are right, and I happen to agree with them, if they make their case, that's eventually going to win out in the marketplace. What you shouldn't have is a dictatorial government that tells certain industries they're not allowed to do what they need to do. You've got to let people make these decisions on their own, and that's sort of been our approach. We want common sense regulatory regimes. We want to allow the cryptocurrency industry to participate in the mainstream of the economy. But then ultimately, the laws of economics, the laws of supply and demand are going to make the determinations from there.
In Vegas, you said there's good technology and bad technology.
That's right.
You developed the good technology, but what's the bad technology?
Well, look, I really worry about, I'm a father of a 7, a 5, and a 3-year-old. I really worry about social media, the way that it kind of, in some ways, it connects us to people. That's good. But we also know that it has this really addictive component to it. I think we have to protect our kids from that. We know that it's facilitated a lot of child predation, a lot of child trafficking. We've obviously got to police that and try to prevent as much of that as we can. I didn't think that all technology sort of has a good side and a bad side. It's in some ways the task of government to ensure that, you try to facilitate as much of the socially useful stuff as possible. But when it trends into illegal stuff or predatory stuff, consumer fraud, right? That's the stuff that we really got to protect.
So there's a ruling from the Federal Trade Court that said tariffs are unconstitutional or whatever. This is not some crazy judge. This is more formidable than that. What do you have to say about this?
Well, two things. First of all, I think the judge is wrong, and I think we're going to win this case on appeal. The president has very broad discretions to engage in foreign policy, to actually protect American consumers from foreign predators, from people who are trying to access our markets, dump into our markets, destroy American industries. The president has a lot of power to prevent that stuff from happening. Now, this court decision, I think, is really based on a legal technicality. And so, my second point is the president also has broad discretion to deal with this stuff. So even if you somehow, have this legal technicality hold up in court, I think there are a lot of ways in which the president of the United States can protect American workers and protect American workers from these very, very unfair trade practices. And I think it's important, Greg, to say, okay, What does this mean for the American people? We believe, and we're right, that we are in an emergency. You've seen foreign governments, sometimes our adversaries, threaten the American people with the loss of critical supplies. I'm not talking about toys, plastic toys. I'm talking about pharmaceutical ingredients. I'm talking about the critical pieces of the manufacturing supply chain. If these governments are threatening to cut us off from that stuff, that is by definition a national emergency. And in that national emergency, the president has very broad discretion to fight back, to bring American industry back home, and to make American consumers protected and much safer. That's all he's trying to do. So whatever this court has said, I think the president has the authority to do his job. We're going to keep on fighting the court cases. We're also going to keep on doing the work for the American people.
When Joe Biden was president, Judge Ludig came out and publicly said that Donald Trump and his supporters are a clear and present danger to American democracy.
Yep.
Liz Cheney said he's the greatest threat to our democracy. I mean, just crazy over the top stuff. Sure. My question to you, and I asked President Trump about this, they seem to be authorizing, quite frankly, morally and legally, something really awful to happen to President Trump and you. I'd like your reaction to that, because that seems like very, very dangerous. I don't think it's been sufficiently addressed. And is the deep state trying to sabotage this administration? Things that we can't see that you're probably privy to. I mean, it's a big government, and there's a lot of ways they can trip up your agenda.
Well, when you talk about Michael Ludig or Liz Cheney calling Donald Trump a threat to democracy, he won a massive electoral mandate. And so it's always interesting to me, these people say that we are threats to democracy. What they mean by a threat to democracy is apparently when the American people vote for somebody they don't like. That's not a threat to democracy. Whether you like or dislike the president the people elected, that is the fulfillment of democracy when that president tries to do what he needs to do. Now, there are some issues here, because I think the way that they talk about President Trump in particular, look, I think it actively encourages violence. And you've seen a rise of left-wing political violence. Of course, you had those two people murdered outside the Jewish embassy just last week. Of course, President Trump almost lost his life during the campaign back in June. So you see this escalating political rhetoric. And I think I'd say to Liz Cheney or Michael Ludig or any of these other crazy people, why don't you just pump the brakes and calm down? Because you're going to get somebody hurt. If you think that our policies are bad, argue on the policies. Try to persuade the American people to vote for somebody else the next time. Don't engage in the kind of rhetoric that I think promotes violence against the President of the United States. And I think a lot of them are doing exactly that.
A couple more quick things. It seems to me that the dominant media canceled themselves. I mean, literally canceled themselves. With this book, they've actually now, it's safe to talk about Joe Biden. They're talking about it. They can't be trusted about that. They can't be trusted about January 6th, about all these issues. And I feel like there should be a major pivot point away from dominant media that, I don't know, it seems like business as usual. This was a big, big deal, a big revelation. Well, we already knew it, but, you know.
I think we're seeing that pivot away from traditional media. I mean, I'd love to see the media reform. I'm not sure if they're psychologically capable of doing it, Greg. But, I mean, look, your network taking off is a big evidence of this. You see the creation of this massive podcast ecosystem. People are tuning out traditional media. As you know, they've got a lower approval rating traditional media does than Congress, which is actually a very hard thing to do. It's almost a skill in and of itself to have a lower approval rating than Congress, but somehow CBS and NBC and ABC have managed to do it. But look, I think these things tend to happen gradually. You're going to see the rise of alternative media. It's already happening. It's going to accelerate in the years to come.
What's life like in the observatory? You have a special residence that vice presidents didn't always have.
Yes. No, I'm very grateful to the American people for that house, because it's a beautiful house. And importantly, for our 3 kids, it's actually a very private place for them to grow up. They can go outside and play. They can ride their bikes. They can play soccer and baseball. We really love it there, and I'm very grateful that I get to live there the next few years.
2 more quick things. Whistleblowers. The left seems to, they have a whistleblower on their hands. They're going to give them a podcast. They're going to facilitate their run for Congress, all that kind of stuff. On the right, the FBI whistleblowers are going to food pantries and stuff like that.
Sure.
Should there be something in our culture to do more for those people who kind of stick their necks out? Maybe we can't. Maybe that's a sign that it's deliberate and it's corrupt and it's political what they do, but do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean, but Greg, I think that, first of all, people have to have a little patience here, because some of these investigations take a long time to actually, figure themselves out. And you've got to let the facts and the law drive this stuff. Anytime that you engage in political persecution, you're engaging in the left's game, and the courts are by and large going to throw that out. I think that you're seeing a lot of what Pam Bondi and Kash Patel is doing. They are looking into a lot of the malfeasance of the last administration. They're looking into illegal conduct. They're looking into, what these whistleblowers have identified as bad things, but they're investigating as they should. And I think being deliberate about this is the way that we make sure that when we uncover wrongdoing, we're actually able to prosecute it.
Very quickly, daily routine. What time do you wake up? What do you have for breakfast? Do you work out? I mean,
Yeah. So I tend to wake up pretty early. We got 3 kids. And so I'll tend to wake up around 6 o'clock, take a shower, get the kids to school. And then we try to either walk or run with our dog. And then I'll try to be in the office pretty early. And then, it just depends on what happens in the West Wing. Sometimes you're traveling. Sometimes, you're in the West Wing all night. Sometimes it's pretty simple. You get to go home and have dinner with your kids. It's very dependent on what's going on in the world. And it's one of the things that's very cool about this job is that really, you are the last line of defense on some of these things. If a hotspot explodes, God forbid, somewhere in the world, it's very often me or the president or somebody else in the West Wing who's getting that call to deal with it.
do you have a favorite predecessor? You have 50 vice presidents. I think you're the 50th. Do you have a favorite?
I'd probably, I guess the easy answer is John Adams, the first vice president. I think a guy who in a lot of ways was a true statesman who recognized, if you look at what John Adams said, he recognized there was a very deep connection between the morality of the American people, between the Christian principles the country was founded on and the constitutional order itself. I think he was a guy who thought very deeply about the connection between the character and the nature of the American people and the constitutional republic they had set up. You can't have one without the other. And I think he's probably the guy that I look to the most, certainly the most inspiring and thoughtful vice president.
Last thing, the political pros I talk to say you are the most powerful vice president ever. And
I don't know about that.
And also that you have the greatest chance to get the nomination. It's not even close. The fundraising apparatus, the political machine, it's yours. And they've never seen anything like it. Is that true, their assessment?
I have no idea, Greg. I mean, my attitude on this is, first of all, anything that I'm able to do because the president empowers me to do it on his behalf. If you look at the role of the vice president in the Constitution, it's not very well defined. It's very much dependent on the president. And so if I'm able to do good things, it's because the president has trust in me. That's a great honor. And again, I just try to do the best job that I can. On the politics, man, I'm much more worried about the midterms than I am about anything in 2028. And I'm much more worried about what's going to happen next month than I am the midterm elections of next year. So my attitude is I focus on this job. I try to do as good of a job as I can. The politics will figure itself out.
Vice President J.D. Vance, thank you.
Good to see you, Greg.
Very, very
Thanks,
much.
man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Muy pronto, vuelve a escuchar las noticias más relevantes en este canal de noticias. Muy pronto, vuelve a escuchar las noticias más relevantes en este canal de noticias.